Hey there. Today I'm going to answer the question, will electric vehicles crash the grid? No. Somehow, I think proponents of this idea will want a more in-depth answer. So come along with me on this journey. Let's start with the news story that probably gave this idea its biggest boost. California asks residents not to charge cars on September 1st, 2022, basically a year ago. California is famous for renewable energy, even though Texas usually creates more. And since they have a lot of EVs, this was considered proof positive that if the grid already can't handle EVs, and if we have even more, surely things are just going to get worse. Rest assured, this is very unlikely to be the case. What many of the pundits who blared this headline also left out was that they were only asking California residents not to charge their electric vehicles between 4 and 8 p.m., which is when peak demand happens. I also think there's an ignorance of just how little electricity EVs require. We're all used to how much power gas engines require, so if we put that same amount of energy into our cars, intuitively, it just makes sense that converting our fleet into an electric one will destroy the electrical grid. People also probably imagine that people stop at gas stations during the day, and so therefore, people who drive EVs must be stopping to charge them during the day, presumably between 4 and 8 p.m. Unfortunately, basically all these suppositions are wrong. As for the first one, they didn't end up having any problems with the grid due to people scaling back their usage voluntarily. But do you know that what actually causes demand issues? People using their AC. AC makes up about 30% of your electric bill, if not more. How does that compare to charging an EV? Most people barely notice the difference after buying one. Also, the point in time when demand is highest is usually around 4 to 8 p.m. when they ask you not to charge. And is not when charging typically happens. You typically charge overnight when demand is at its lowest and electricity costs are also at their lowest. Over 90% of charging happens at night at home. Now you may be wondering about how your electric bill can barely budge if you're charging an electric car. After all, it's a huge battery and you definitely know how much money you spend on gas. The reason for this discrepancy is the efficiency of electric motors. They convert over 90% of the power delivered to them from the battery into forward motion. The ceiling for that for a gas engine is about 40% and is usually lower. So think about this the next time you buy gas. About 2/3 of the money you're spending is just wasted as heat. Want to be more efficient? Buy an EV. If you doubt my claim that motors are more efficient than gas cars, I'll appeal to something you already know to be true. Priuses are more efficient than gas cars. Why are they more efficient? They're using a motor when it's advantageous to do so, as opposed to the engine. The drawback is that it makes them very complex, and they still have all the drawbacks of gas cars, like oil changes and going to the gas station. Why is the energy draw of air conditioners so high compared to EVs? Well, I haven't seen any official articles on this, but I would guess that since EVs are normally driven about 30 miles a day, they're only charging for about an hour or two. In the summer, does your AC only run for about an hour or two? No, it's usually running for several hours. The only way your car is charging for several hours every day on level 2 during peak demand when prices are highest is if you're driving more than 200 miles a day. That's going to be a very small portion of the population. If everyone started driving EVs tomorrow, electrical demand would probably go up about 5 to 10%, and that'd be mostly at night. However, we will not all be going electric tomorrow. The fleet turns over at a rate of about 5% per year, and not everybody's buying electric. So over the next several years, we'll be increasing our electrical capacity. Technically, we have enough renewable power in the pipeline and proposed projects to completely cover our needs. Unfortunately, not all those projects will be made. We're having problems now because we're still waiting for infrastructure to be built, which basically means high voltage transmission lines, which are expensive. And remember, the people who run the grid and the people who run the utilities are aware of this problem. It's not just ill-informed boomers on Facebook that recognize that our electricity needs are increasing. Utilities make more money when people use more electricity, so they're very happy to add more capacity, just like they're happy to give you a discount to help you get a level 2 charging station. The only thing they're not happy about is you possibly generating your own electricity from solar. But that's a topic for another video. Now that I've explained why the original claim is false, let me go into exactly why the opposite is more likely to be true, which is that EVs will help stabilize the grid. What are EVs if not a giant battery stuck in a car? And what does California, and increasingly Texas, do to stabilize their grid? Utilize batteries at time of peak demand when there isn't a lot of solar available. This is already happening in both California and Texas. I believe the record for the amount of power derived from batteries is a bit over 4 gigawatts in California, and we've recently had a few evenings in Texas wherein over 1 gigawatts of electricity was derived from batteries. Normally, it's a bit over 3 gigawatts in California and around 500 megawatts in Texas, but those numbers will continue to go up as batteries continue to be installed. Now, many people have their cars plugged in for the evening by the time maximum demand is happening. After all, what is causing this massive demand but people coming home and turning on things like air conditioners and stoves in order to get dinner served while the sun is coming down? So if their EV is at home and it doesn't need to be driven until tomorrow morning, then grid operators can take a few kilowatt hours out of that battery before returning it when it's much cheaper. What does the owner of the EV get out of this deal? They can make a good chunk of change per kilowatt hour. For context, the average cost per kilowatt hour in the US is 15 cents, and when grid operators pull electricity out of Powerwalls, the price is $2 per kilowatt hour, and that's still cheaper than gas peaker plants. So the EV owner is getting reimbursed, the grid operators have an on-demand source of electricity that's cheaper than peaker plants, while stabilizing the grid, and we're not releasing as many planet-warming emissions into the environment. That's literally a win-win-win. You really can't do much better than that. That setup is called a virtual power plant, and if that sounds like science fiction, we're already doing it. We technically aren't doing it with EV batteries, but with Powerwalls, but the principle is the same. I'll go more in depth on VPPs, or virtual power plants, in another video. This one is definitely long enough. Critics of this video may point out that the world's most popular EVs, Teslas, don't have gold-to-grid, or as it's called, V2G capability yet. And they'd be right. I'm not exactly sure why they don't. Possibly because many people have free supercharging miles, and so they may go to the supercharger network, fill up their car, and then use it to power their house. This is unlikely to be a good use of their time, but most people don't even know what behavioral economics is, much less be able to apply it to their own situation. What I do know is that the technology is simple, and I know that because my Leaf has this capability, and my Leaf is almost 10 years old. Ford electric trucks also have this capability, and a number of OEMs will as well, so it's definitely possible. In fact, Tesla will be adding this capacity to their car within the next few years. In conclusion, don't worry about EVs crashing the grid. The opposite is more likely to be true. So go out and get your own, and happy charging!